Hello there, I'm Blackbright, and I've decided to talk about Black Britishness today. First time you're passing through, you're welcome to hit the thumbs up, the thumbs down, interact with my subscribers, leave a comment, share, and subscribe, to help build the channel. I don't know what's happening with my subscribe rate, but anyway. So, what I wanted to do is talk about Black Britishness and Britishness, actually. But I'm talking about Black Britishness today because I was in two situations and it kind of drew attention to it. Well, my attention was drawn to how Black British people behave, and I'm I'm one of them. So the first incident was I was attending a meeting, and in the meeting it was a Black Lives Matter meeting, and the BAMEs, the Black and minority ethnics, and issues with that. And it was at work, so we had a team of white people and Black people. The white people were very, very senior in the organisation, and the Black people were all managers. I think there was two administrators, what me and one other, but all the others were very, very high up. And so I think that kind of setup in a hierarchical organization um, is kind of deliberate, because you'd have to be pretty confident in what you're talking about to speak up. Even though I talk on these videos, I'm not really that confident to speak, because I never think of myself as an authority on any subject. I just read something and I have an opinion on it, but I haven't done any major research. That's not my thing. So I don't feel like I'm qualified to speak as an authority. So I kind of in this first situation, in this BAME meeting, I we was it was done, on a virtual. You don't have to turn your video on. I mean, you have to sign in so people know you're there, but they don't actually see your face. So I was sitting there and I was listening, and they were talking about issues that Black people experienced. And the majority of Black people, apart from the lady who was leading it, who was African, the majority of people who were speaking were obviously Black British. From their tone, from their accent, I could tell that they're very, very likely to be born in the UK. What was interesting is that the Black British were very polite. They kind of tiptoed around what they wanted to say. And whereas the Black African were very clear, very direct, and asking the questions that you would have thought they would have had the answers to, the people who were kind of chairing the meeting. Anyway, my point is that as I was listening to the Black Brits, I noticed that they was almost apologising for their opinion or making a statement. And I think that's what I think Brits as a whole do that anyway. We're very apologetic. We always say sorry when we don't need to. We always say excuse me when we don't need to. So I think we have a very apologetic culture. And I think when I'm thinking about a Black Brit, I nearly said Black bitch, but I meant Black Brit. When I think about Black Brits, I can kind of understand why we're received with such skepticism from people from other Black countries like Africa and the Caribbean and stuff like that, because we almost come over as artificial. We come over as false. We come over as though we're not sincere, as though we're disingenuous, when it's a learnt behaviour, it's a learned culture, it's the way we survive, it's the way Black Brits survive. And those who, if you come from another country and if you're fortunate enough to work in a kind of a open organisation like a health organisation or the government, you'll find a lot of black people who are not British in there. And that's because they have an equality policy and a diversity policy. And so they are not intimidated by black people who may come over as a bit aggressive or when they're really just being direct. But if they were to try and get a post in maybe a private company, they may have some difficulty unless they're really, really qualified in a certain area and the people who are interviewing them are very open. So what I think as Black Brits is that because we're apologetic and because we're so polite and because we go around the houses to say something, we could actually be perceived as being deceptive and false. It's not really the case, it's the culture. Because with Black Brits, we have had to learn over the years that if you don't conform or behave a certain way, you're not going to get anywhere. You don't get anywhere by being aggressive and rude and loud. And so we actually toe the line. And then you'll find those who don't toe the line and who may speak out, even though they're Black Brits, they can be seen as kind of interesting, an oddity. I don't think they mind one or two of them. Like you have some people who are like comedians or stuff. You know, if you have somebody who's quite a comedian, someone who can laugh at themselves, they're accepted as being loud and, you know, overt and straightforward. But if there was too many of them, it would be an issue. So I find that Black Brits tend to tiptoe around, and I think it is a part of the culture. So white people do that as well. White people, they might want to say one thing, but they learn how to word it so it's not supposed to cause offence. And can you imagine what our brains have to go through when we can't be natural? Who are we, really? What would we be like if we didn't have to censor ourselves? What would I be like if I didn't have to censor myself? I don't think I'm far off of who I am, really. But I think that because I tend to speak before I think sometimes, I would probably get myself in a lot of trouble by saying something that's not quite politically correct. So I do try to kind of make sure that I don't offend anyone, even though you can't help offending people when you're in an open forum. No 100% are going to agree with what you say. But I think it is, you know, putting that aside, I think it is difficult to try and be yourself without coming over as aggressive or rude. And I think that was what was happening in that meeting. I felt like saying, you know, one of the girls was saying, oh, well, we've got to have special programs for Black people so that they can accelerate up the ladder. And, you know, some Black people are quite, they feel entitled. They feel as though we've got to give them a job. And, you know, we have some Black people who've got a chip on their shoulder, you know. They've had a chip on their shoulder from the time that they joined the organisation. And I was sitting there thinking, you know, that you don't know the Black person's experience. You don't know that individual's experience. That person who you say may have a chip on their shoulder, you do not know their experience. So you kind of sit there thinking that you've got people in relative power who make these decisions, and it's supposed to be a group that is supposed to facilitate people to communicate about issues they're going through. And then you hear something like that and you kind of think, well, you know, why would I want to speak? Would I feel safe speaking in this kind of forum? I don't think I would. And so I kept stum. On top of that, I also kept stum because I am quite reactionary and I might have misheard what she was saying. And then somebody else came up and said, "Oh, another black person. Oh, I solely agree with what so and so said. Yes, I think some people do. Some black people do have a chip on their shoulder. I think some people do come to jobs unprepared." And I thought, that's just not black people. That's anybody. Anybody could come in unprepared. Anybody could come. And what do you mean by chip on your shoulder? What does that mean? I don't believe somebody's going to come into an interview room and say, "Look, I don't think I'm going to get this job because I'm black." I don't think somebody's going to go into. They might think it, I guess if they think it, it might reflect in their behaviour. But I can't imagine, because why go for the interview in the first place if that's the case? So I don't think that is necessarily the case, because there's no way I'm going to go to an interview thinking I'm not going to get it because I'm black and still go. Why would I put myself through that? That doesn't make any sense. Anyway, my point is that there's this politeness that we learn that helps us to get up the ladder. And we learn very fast that you have to behave a certain way in order to get the door cracked open. And I think with white people, the only difference with white people is that I think another white person would be more tolerant of another white person, maybe a little less tolerant of a black person. So if a white person spoke a bit out of turn, because they can identify with that white person, they probably will just say, "Okay, they're having a bad day. We'll talk about it tomorrow." Whereas I'm not sure if they'd be so forgiving if it was a black person, or maybe it is that black person's perception of how they might be treated differently. And I don't think black people a lot of the time put themselves in a position. They don't give anyone a reason to say this or that, because unless they've kind of messed up anyway and they've got nothing to lose, they're probably just toe the line. But I was thinking about black Britishness and Britishness, and whether British is a colour or a culture. I believe British is a culture, not a colour, even though they'd like to assign all the non-whites to the British category and all the whites to the English category. But when you think about British, whether you're British or you're English, regardless of which part of the UK you were born or you grew up, you speak that language. So it's really bizarre sometimes when you see on TV like Asian people speaking Scottish. It's not so strange seeing black people speaking Brummie, but it's like, those ones they're up the north where they speak with a northern accent. And when you watch that, or when you hear that, and you hear Asian Scots or people from Bristol who are black, and you hear those different accents, you kind of think it just looks strange. It doesn't really fit the profile. But that's why I'm thinking being British is a culture. So it is a way of behaving. It is a way of interacting. It is a way of navigating. And I think that is why if you go to a different country, regardless of what colour you are, if you hear a Brit voice and you're in a strange country where nobody speaks English and you hear a Brit talking, regardless of that colour, you're going to gravitate towards that Brit. I know that anywhere I am in the world, when I hear that British voice, I'm like, "Oh my God, they're from England, they're from England." I get bloody excited. It's as though, what? I don't even know them. But it doesn't even matter. In strange countries, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't seem to matter. We wouldn't do it in the UK. There's no way I would go up to a white person and say, "Oh, I'm from England, I'm from blah, blah, blah." But when you're abroad and, you're kind of, you're not isolated, but you're in a place where they don't speak English and you come across another Brit, you will gravitate towards that Brit. There is something about that. And I know that wherever I am when I hear the British voice, I gravitate towards it. But I think it is interesting that, as much as my parents are from Jamaica, you will find people whether it's from Jamaica or from the islands, whether it's from Montserrat, St. Kitts, St. Nevis, St. Vincent, wherever it's from, even Africa, they will kind of view Black Brits until they get to know them, they will treat them with a bit of skepticism because we are taught to behave in a certain way and communicate in a different way, we could come over as false. That's what I'm saying. And what else was I going to say? Yeah, so despite being disadvantaged in the UK, I still feel that Black people have an affiliation to being British. And that's not something you can leave. So that's why it places us in such an awkward position when we're not accepted as British, when we're not accepted as belonging here. Because in our heart and in our soul, we feel British. There's nowhere else for us to go. And it's bizarre that the concept of saying go back to where you come from or you don't belong here, it's a bizarre concept because it's very conflictual. Because we don't belong anywhere else. We're kind of like an oddity. We really are. We're like oddities. And I don't think there's any other country where you could feel that way. I don't think there is. I don't know, but I don't think there is. And then I was listening. The other part was when I was listening to a debate between David Olusago and Afua Hirschs. Speak very, very, very well spoken. I think Afua Hirschs writes for The Guardian, and David Olusago, he is a historian, a broadcaster. They're both authors. They both got these books out on identity and race and all that. And but when they speak out, they speak about Black history, and they talk, well, in particular, David Olusago, he talks about it in great depth. I mean, he studied it, and he knows the history, he knows the slavery, he knows all the atrocities. And the irony is that when he speaks about he doesn't seem to have much. It's like he speaks really posh, and when people ask him questions, I think if that was me and I knew what he knew, I'd be quite agitated and angry and frustrated. But between him and Afua, when they were in this question and answer thing about their book and their experiences, and they seem to laugh it off and minimize it, and maybe that's just my perception, the way it came over. But it was like somebody asked them a question, and it was quite a deep, complex question. And they're just like, oh, just it's all in my book. It's all in my book. And I was wondering, is that a cop out then? You can put what you really feel, what you want to say in a book, but you're not going to say it in the same way when asked. It was just a thought, because I don't know if they can help who they are helping, because their audience is mostly white, and that kind of information that they know should really be in mainstream schools. And I think the white audiences will probably look at them as oddities. They're a bit curious. They go there. You've got two people of colour, we have to call them, because they're mixed race. They probably call themselves Black. I'm not quite sure. But the thing is, you've got people, their audience is going there and looking at them, and for them, they probably, the type of people who go to those kind um, book book launches, they probably know a lot of the history already, and they're probably hoping to get something new, a different slant on it, and they're probably quite interested you're interested for that moment, and it's all quite novel, and then they'll probably go home to have their plate of fish and chips. So there's all this trauma being exhaled on the stage, and yet nobody's taking it in. And I sometimes think, I wonder if people like David and Afua believe that by teaching the white audience what our ancestors have been through, that somehow they'll understand and empathize, and things will change. I don't think things will change. Because I believe the white people who think that way, or who are racist, or who don't know that they're racist, but that set of people, I don't think you could change their mindset. I don't think that they're really interested in changing. I think that is just the way they are. And I don't think you can teach an old dog new tricks. I think they're probably best placed speaking to younger people in universities and in schools, sixth form schools and stuff like that, because they're the people who need to know that information. I think it's a bit wasted on a group of people who are just thinking about going home for lunch, while you're pouring your guts out about how many slaves were killed, and all of that kind of stuff. So I naively thought that, even sometimes when I'm talking on these videos, I sometimes think, I wonder if I make a difference to anyone. I wonder if there's a white person out there who might look at black people a bit differently. But it's naive of me, because there's not many people. People have to want to change themselves. No one can change anyone. People have to want to believe in a fair, unbiased world. And, they'd have to think, okay, she makes a bit of sense, but they probably think, same old, same old. So I don't think we can teach people to treat other people fairly if it's not in their, not in their makeup to do so. So we have black Brits who are quite proud to be British, even though they get slagged off if they say that, because they're like, how can you be proud to be British when you're colonialized and you don't belong nowhere, and the British don't want you, and you're kind of nothing, you're nobody, you don't belong anywhere. And that's what black Brits have to contend with, this fragmented identity where you kind of half feel as though you belong, but the media and the news and everybody else tells you that you don't. And the fact that you're born here, you'd have to be able to prove that you're born here. So set us all up on a hill. We're just foreigners. If we're not allowed to open up our mouths, we're just foreigners. We're just immigrants. And that's a sad thing, because that is what seems to determine who belongs and who doesn't. Just the colour of your skin. So the fact that you're born here, the fact that you've been educated here, the fact that you've been working, you've done everything right, is of no consequence. So feeling black and feeling British is it's a paradox, because we want to belong, but we're not allowed to have that feeling. And, it's quite sad, actually. So what else have I got here that I wanted to talk about? Yeah, so we've inherited these communication skills. The way we communicate, it's not to deceive, it's not to make us feel as though we're trying to make everything look nice and sound good. It's just how we've been conditioned. It's how we've been grown up. It's the way, art of survival. You want to get a job, you have to speak a certain way, you have to present yourself in a certain way. And unless, like I said, you've got somebody who's open-minded and who doesn't mind a little bit of the real you, and that's totally different. I think if I was to think about the real me is probably a bit cocky and doesn't think much before she speaks. So this has been a real learning curve for me, because I have had to think before I speak, because you're on a platform where, you know, people could be throwing darts at you for all I know. You know what I mean? Anyway, what else? So yeah, I think I have finished what I wanted to say. Despite disadvantage, I've said that. We're all the same regardless of race, said that. Expect civility, good manners. That's the only way you can be accepted. Who are we? Or if we behave in a manner that's acceptable. Oh yeah, talking about speaking in a way that's acceptable, I was also thinking about, you know, you have classes of people who effing blind, but they're kind of relegated to that certain class, and it's almost accepted. So say you have I don't even know how to word it really, because you might have a set of people who effing and blind, and I'm going down the effing shop and I'm going to do this effing, and if you effing touch me, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And even if the police stop people like that, they kind of allow them to speak like that, because they've already accepted that they're coming from this that kind of community where that is the way they communicate. So it's almost like there's allowances made for a set of white people who can actually be totally themselves and be totally rude to the police and effing blind. But that's where I say the differences come in, and that's why we need more representation, especially in the police force, so that people can understand that if a black person swears, it's no different from when a white person swears. That black person isn't necessarily going. You're not in any more danger when a black person loses their top as a white person. So, and I don't know how a white person can actually see that. I don't know how, especially the police officers, I don't know how they can see an angry white person who's effing and blinding. I mean, I saw a video where this police was trying to stop this drunk guy, and he spoke to him, and the guy is a white guy. He smashed his face in with a bottle. The police officer went down on the floor after while all the police came around. Just like, bloody hell. Drunk, and he looked about like he was 50s in his 60s, drunk as a coot. But my point is that that's probably the wrong example. But my point is that if you get a white bloke who's effing you, effing this, you effing this, you don't get your effing hands off of me, blah, blah, blah. You watch those police interceptors, they'll say, come on, son, get in there, stop making a noise, just be quiet. Or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. But a black person, even without that aggression, is seen more threatening just by their presence than that white person who's effing and blinding. And it is that lack of understanding. It is that, you know, the fact that you are of a different colour. Because I remember watching Good Morning Britain, and these black guys they weren't swearing, but they did sound loud and aggressive. And one of the broadcasters said, my God, weren't you scared? Weren't you terrified? And he said, no, they were just airing. They were just sharing their feelings. So he was able to understand that because he was black and he didn't feel threatened. But a white person in that situation would feel threatened. I think if I heard a white person effing and blinding, I might even feel threatened. I might think, bloody hell, I better get out of here. So it's that kind of you know, trying to, but you can't. You've got the colour there. It's right there standing in front of you. You can't, you know, if you're not that way, you can't just wipe it out of your memory, can you? So I don't know. Anyway, I just thought I'd babble on about being black and British. I hope it makes some sense. Bye bye.